Hello and welcome to another episode of MindMeld, where we try and help you move up in the world and not just on with it. My amazing guest today is Jackie Hanley from the UK. Jackie helps recruitment professionals and leaders grow through both developing skills and embracing inclusion. And she does this by utilizing small steps to change. So it doesn't feel like a big, massive leap from one thing to another. Jackie designs and delivers immersive training programs on the topics of recruitment, leadership, diversity, and inclusion, and as well as delivering action-focused keynotes that leave people inspired, engaged, and ready to take positive action. And I really want to say that I benefited from Jackie's speech at the Plan B Summit. I mean, it was just, she was so dynamic. Well, I should actually just talk to you. You were so dynamic, and you stood there, and it really touched me because I think everybody has that feeling sometimes of having felt left out. And you
Right.
went through your journey and the changes and the actions that you did to manage your own change, and I think that's just brilliant. And uh, can you share a bit about how this came about? How did you actually start speaking about diversity and inclusion? Why is that so important to
Wow.
you?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Brant. It's great to be here. So the journey's been one of that's evolved really. I mean, I've kind of gone through my own journey personally since I was around 14, 15. But in terms of my kind of now corporate work and speaking about that journey and diversity and inclusion, that's kind of occurred in the last couple of years. I joined the Professional Speaking Association of UK and Ireland in February 2018, and I looked to that really as a natural extension of my training and consultancy work. And, you know, I speak to people all the time, so it was just taking my voice to a bigger stage. And I was really struck by the welcome, if you like, from that new community. And through that, I started to talk about a couple of business topics, and some of the feedback that I received was, okay, so these are good, but where's the real Jackie? What's the difference in you? You know, what makes you you? And so I thought, well, my difference is what makes me me, right? And all of our differences is what make us us. And so I'll talk about that because there is it's you know, as you will know, Brent, you know, when you speak, you don't just speak to kind of talk about yourself for half an hour or whatever, but you speak to deliver messages of hope and inspiration, and of course to help promote positive change. And I really felt that in my message I was able to do, through my story, I was able to do that. And so that's kind of how I started speaking on it. In September of 2018, I delivered a TEDx, which is entitled The Exclusive Nature of Inclusion. And I delivered that. So that was really the longest speech I mean, it's only 13, 14 minutes, but still the longest speech at that point I delivered on a stage, you know, a proper stage. And it was so well received, both in the room on the day and beyond. I mean, I think it's kind of currently at about 25,000 views or something like that. And from that, it's almost encouraged organizations, perhaps that I've worked with previously, or new organizations to get in touch and say, right, how can you help us? So that journey has enabled me to start to help more people, which was always my intention through my business and my consultancy work. So yeah, that was the start of the journey, really. And you know, people, I think, seem to recognize, as you mentioned in that intro there, you know, people recognize that, we can have these great, big, grand corporate strategies in our business, and that is a great start. But actually, diversity and inclusion is not the role of a HR department or a culture director. Diversity and inclusion is the responsibility for all of us. And it can be such a big topic that we sometimes just don't know where to start. And so I help people look for small ways that we can all start to take ownership for creating a more inclusive space.
That's so nice. Even in my own creativity training, when I show people how different we all are, but how valuable those differences make when we come together and build new ideas and
Right.
new structures. And I tell people, you know, if you want new ideas, you need to start talking to new people. And it
Right.
can't be people who just associate because they're in the same on the same economic level as you or the same side of the road or whatever, you know. It has to be people who are vastly different than you, as well as people who are very similar to you. You have to have
Right.
a dimension of inclusion and diversity in what you do. Otherwise, we just don't grow because, you know, the same people you talk to are the ones that give you back the same sort of feedback. It doesn't help.
Exactly. That's it. And, you know, I think, you know, you perhaps remember in my talk in Namibia recently, you know, I spoke about when we leverage the potential in humanity, the possibilities are endless, you know, and the results can be truly magical. But you're absolutely right. You know, and all the statistics will prove those points as well, you know, that homogenous teams of people in businesses that are very similar in their background, in their life experience, in their positioning in life, and whatever kind of groups they fall into, are less successful and less innovative, creative, and ultimately profitable than diverse teams. But you also make the point that it is not just about getting lots of different people in a room together, because that can feel like tokenism or tick box, but instead it's taking steps to really draw in the experiences of those different people in a safe space without judgment, just an acceptance and an embracing of what different people can bring to the table. And when we do that, it's magical.
I want to talk about forced diversity. And because I don't think forcing diversity is a good strategy.
Right.
Because I like what you're saying, that we need to draw the different people to work together. But pushing people into a room just because they look different or sound different or whatever, it's not a good strategy, because they're just making more enemies, really. But if we draw out the best of people, right? Because like I was speaking last year to another diversity trainer, Brian Moore, and he was asking, why do you need to force it? You don't need to force it. There's so many people who fit the bill already. You just need to draw them out. And exactly what you're saying now, you don't have to push people. You need to lure them to work together. A few years ago, I started a food garden in my town. And I read all kinds of agricultural books and all kinds of stuff. And with my Western knowledge, I knew everything, right? Here comes this little boy, and he's making rope out of the dead plants from the trees and all kinds of things. And he's telling me, no, I need to do this with the rake and all kinds of things. And the amount of knowledge that he had, right? 30 years younger than me, he knows far more. And I wouldn't have been able to be as successful if I didn't stop and listen to what two people were saying, because I don't know everything. And the thing is, I think we get so locked in with our own experiences, our own knowledge, that we forget to see that other people have different experiences that could help us and help us grow.
Absolutely.
Do you have to ever deal with forced diversity in your training or your companies?
Well, yes, unfortunately. And, you know, I think I'm absolutely 100% agree with the point that I don't want to be on a stage because I'm a woman, because I'm a certain age, or because who I live with. I want to be on a stage because I have a message that is valued by the audience, that you know, the people I'm going to share that with. And I think if you ask anybody that question, they would say the same thing. They want to be valued for who they are as a whole person, not just certain labeling that means that for some reason I get treated differently. You know, we talk about the fact that we don't want to see people treated unfairly. And when we think of that term unfairly, we think that oh, well, maybe a woman wouldn't get on the stage, or maybe somebody of color wouldn't have a voice, or maybe somebody that was older wouldn't be taken forward for a job. But actually the reverse also applies, you know, that sometimes women may be treated unfairly in that they are unfairly advantaged. And an older person is taken on board because an organization wants to kind of tick their quota.
Right, yeah.
And that's, so it may feel in the short term, you know, a great thing for the woman who gets invited on the stage, or the older person that gets promoted into a role. But that will be short-lived if that's not followed up by an inclusive environment. And this is where I think we have to be really careful, because, you know, diversity comes in many, many forms, and it is just that. You know, you wear glasses, I don't wear glasses. I've got blonde hair, you've got brown hair, you know, and so on. So, you know, there's so much difference. We've even got different headphones on them. And so, you know, there's so much difference when we look around at those experiences, and, you know, and facial features and all those kind of things. But the important thing is, as you say, to be able to step beyond that realm of, and we can label it however we want to label it, unconscious bias or whatever we want to call it. But I believe it's simply about kindness to other human beings. And when we start with kindness and from a place of love, and I mean that in a not an intimate sense per se, but I mean that from just a, you know, everybody is lovable. We just have to work to find those lovable elements from each person. And you know, when I shared my own story, and you know, when I came out as gay with to my parents, which, you know, is a whole other story, as you know, and it was kind of dragged out of me rather than, you know, just kind of, hey, guess what, mum and dad. But they both had very strong beliefs. My mum, you know, very religious beliefs. My dad, just social beliefs, if you like, from the era. Whatever the reasons, we all have layers of beliefs and values. But it was so interesting that the way my parents were able to, partly immediately and partly over time, came to not just accept, but embrace. And, you know, they don't love me because I'm gay. They don't love me because I'm a woman. They love me because I am me. And there are so many different facets of that. And that is the same for every other human being on this planet. And I really believe that, you know, despite the troubles in the world, despite some of the atrocities in the world, I do believe that every individual on this planet has good within them. And, you know, so when I talk about inclusion and I link it to the term love and kindness, you know, sometimes people get a bit freaked out about it, because we don't talk about love and, you know, in the workplace, but we all understand how love feels.
Yeah,
that's the thing. And so by talking about it in these terms, I believe, and the feedback I've had is that it highlights there is so much more in this life that connects us than divides us, if only we take the time to notice.
I like that. There's so much more that connects us than divides us. My mentor, Alan Black, also said something similar about, you know, we have so many similarities that focusing on the differences, we said similarities bring us together, but focusing on our differences only divides us, you know, something like that. And it's, and if you focus only on this one thing that makes you different, right, you're missing all the wonderful things that you can do to connect with people. It's funny, actually, a few years ago when I was still a teacher, a child came to me during break when I was sitting in my class alone and just marking cases and stuff. And she asked me, what do I think about gay people? And I said, that's a weird question to just like give me, but okay. I never really thought about it. I guess people are still people. Doesn't matter really if they're gay or straight or whatever. You know, some people do good things, some people do bad things. But at the end of the day, people are still people. We shouldn't just abandon people because they have different elements to them, or they feel
Right.
differently than you do. You just don't
Hmm.
abandon people. And she started crying, and she thinks she's bi. She
Okay.
thinks she's bi because she's attracted to girls and boys. And I said, have you told anybody else this? Like, she wants to tell her parents, but because they're very religious, she doesn't feel like they would understand.
Right.
And my advice to her was, tell them anyway. You might be surprised that the love would outweigh any sort of other element, because they love you and they adore you and all kinds of things. And so this small part of you doesn't exclude you from love. And
Hmm.
she did, and she's actually, she left the school a few years later, but I still get messages thanking me for that advice. And
Wow.
it's just like, it's weird because you have to start with people first, right? Instead of oh, you wear glasses and I don't wear glasses, so you're not in my clique, you're not in my section of people that I talk to. Or you're black and I'm white, you're a tall, thin black man, I'm a short, fat white guy, whatever.
Right.
Focusing on
Right.
our differences only does little more than divide us. And
Yeah.
I so love what you're saying about, start the human first, and about love. And I know that corporates don't like the word love, because to them it probably means something different, probably
Well,
lawsuits or
maybe
something.
maybe for them they can change that word to value.
To
You
value,
know, if
yeah.
yeah, that would be a kind of corporate word for love, if you like. That there's a value in everybody, and if we can unlock that value and that capacity. I mean, it is interesting, and I don't want to contradict myself here, because actually all our differences are also beautiful, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but our differences, I mean, any kind of communications training will tell you that, if you want to build rapport with somebody, then you try to find some common ground.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't exclude the uniqueness that each person brings. So there is something good about difference as well. But we have to really start. Well, we don't have to, but generally as human beings, we start from a place of, okay, so what connects us? What can we find that connects us? Common interests, common grounds, common purpose, common values. And from there, as the relationships develop, we start to, interestingly, more and more acknowledge that, oh, you do it this way. That's cool. And this is how inclusion comes about. It's hard to say to people, look, don't look for the differences, because I've had people say to me in, rooms of senior leaders, Jackie, I don't see difference. And I
It's like,
say,
oh, you probably
we
should.
all see difference. Yeah, we all see difference. I see difference. We do. That is a natural, it's a predisposition, and it goes way, way back to, times where we were in tribes, and, we looked at those people in crowds, out crowds. I talk about that, and that we somehow had this affinity to those people that were like us. And that would be, of course, surface level. But I think from that place, you can then start to say, right, okay, but, as we started really, how could it be if there were different levels of thinking?
Yeah.
How could it be if there were different opinions? And, one of the things I often get hit with is, well, will there be less harmony in the team with a diverse team? And actually, the answer to that is initially yes.
Yes.
There will be less harmony. There will be more conflict. Because why wouldn't there be? You've got different people with different opinions, different values, perhaps, that are coming together and having to sort maybe a business problem or whatever it is. And yet, and so just to go back a bit, but I think because of that, sometimes, we like harmony. Generally speaking, we like harmony. We don't like to rock the boat, as we would say. And so that could be another conscious or subconscious reason that we tend to stay in our own little groups, because we think we'll have less pushback, less conflict. But people are forgetting the big picture, that conflict is good, and it can be good. It can be very good to have healthy conflict in a team, in a trusting, safe, psychologically safe environment, and be permitted to work through those differing opinions to come to a place of common ground. And I think the more organizations recognize that, and the more society recognizes that, we will all become much more comfortable with healthy conflict, where it doesn't have to tip over into personal attacks. But and we will reap the benefits from doing so, because that will lead us to come up with some amazing ideas and probably change the world for the better.
Absolutely. I so agree. And I think nations are built on differences, on diversity,
Yes,
and including everybody to work towards a common goal, and not focusing on the differences, but rather celebrating the differences and bringing it together. So you allowing people to be divergent, right? But you converge them in a united cause, in a united way, while still keeping, no one says get rid of your culture, right? Because now you're part of my company, but builds a culture that recognizes your uniqueness, celebrates it even, and rewards you for your courage to think more, to think better, right? And I think because if we're all the same, we all think the same. We all think the same. If just people who look like me, think like me, have the same background like me, we're all going to think the same thing, we're all going to come up with the same answers, and nobody's going to ever do anything, right? And that's not success. That doesn't help. But we shouldn't focus on how different we are, because that just puts us in a us versus them mentality, right? Absolutely. And that's that it doesn't work. It doesn't build anything. All you do is just I use balloons to talk about creativity. So when you blow up the balloon, right, I ask, where does that air come from? And then people will usually say, from me. It's like, okay, and where did you get your air from? Oh, from around us. So whose air is that actually? Oh, it's everybody's air. Right. So you're taking everybody's air, or everybody's ideas, everybody's thoughts, everybody's experiences, and you're drawing it into yourself, you're adding your own value to it, and you push it out into this balloon or this project or this team or whatever.
Great analogy.
Right? But now what happens is, if we take that balloon and we just say, it's my balloon, you can't have my balloon, right? It's just me, right? What happens then if we cling so tightly? And I encourage them to cling tightly, and then all of a sudden, pop. It's like you lost it. It's done. It's broken now. You can't fix it now. Right? But maybe you can build a better one the next time around. So share your ideas, and I have them fly the balloons up, right? And they're all the same color. And then after like 2 minutes of bouncing balloons around, I say, now find yours. Oh no, where's my balloon? It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if it's your balloon or somebody else's balloon. It's about working together towards the common goal. Nobody says get rid of your culture. Nobody says your culture isn't valuable, right? Or your experiences aren't valuable. I'm saying bring them to me and let's build together. So celebrating humanity, come from a place of love or value, if you prefer, and work together towards success. And I think what you do, especially to build those small steps, right? So it doesn't, because we don't like change. Humans, we don't like change, right? Anything, it feels like work. We don't want to do it usually. But putting in small incremental steps is such a brilliant idea, because it doesn't feel such a thing. Like even Apple started, they didn't start with iPhone 10 or whatever it is now, right? It started with this dinky little thing that looked a bit different, kind of faulty, didn't work all the time. But now where are they, right? Small changes over time. It's 100%. Like compound interest.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
I think you mentioned a particular word there that I will pull back on, and that is so vital for this and this journey, and that is courage.
Courage.
So I think there's courage, and I also think there's vulnerability. And when we think about vulnerability, we think about weakness. We think, I mean, you probably are familiar with Brené Brown, the great speaker. She did a great TEDx called The Power of Vulnerability. And for me, I think that is so powerful for this agenda. The courage to be vulnerable, to open yourself up, to say, you know, I don't have all the answers. I don't know where to start. But the courage to step out and say, but I want to try to change, or I want to try and make a difference, or I want to take my first small step. Those two words can be so powerful for inclusion, because I've mentioned very briefly this whole psychological safety piece. This is where problems are created, you know, and even the young girl that you mentioned who came to you about talking to her parents, you know, she felt that she needed to be courageous and vulnerable, because you can't really have one without the other, right? So she felt that she was vulnerable but wanted to be courageous to take that step and tell her parents. Now, she was lucky, you know, that her parents were.
And not everybody is, and it's
and not
so
everybody
sad.
is, unfortunately. That's right. That's right. And you know, I recognise I too was one of the lucky ones those years ago. But I think this is a really important message for businesses and business leaders, is that, you know, if you are in a position to say, I don't know, or I don't understand, that is not weakness, that is courage. You know, because we don't know what we don't know, and we're not born knowing everything, but we have the capacity to know everything if we open ourselves up to those possibilities. And isn't that exactly what we've been talking about in relation to humanity? And if people want to create these kind of true belonging cultures in their organizations, then they have to, you cannot just say to somebody, you know, Simon Sinek and some of the great speakers will say, you can't just say to somebody, trust me, and they will. You have to be able to almost give something in order to get, and where you can give a part of yourself that might say, look, for example, you know, we have this big corporate budget and I'm not quite sure where to start on this journey. Then people that originally would see that as a weakness, actually this is a strength, to be able to be courageous enough and say, look, I don't have all the answers, but I want to take some steps to find out. That's when you then encourage others to say, well, I don't really understand this either, but I've got an idea. And then suddenly the creativity begins. And the same thing applies with humanity and inclusion. You know, I don't know, for instance, you know, somebody that uses a wheelchair, I don't know whether I should stand when I shake their hand, or whether I should, you know, lower myself to the level they're at to shake their hands from an equal standing. Does one or other offend? You know, having the courage to say, I don't know how best to address you. How would you like me to greet you? That's courage and not weakness. We don't have to have all the answers, but we should always be prepared to find out and take the step.
Yeah, I like that so much. There's a lot of times where it feels awkward because you don't know, right? So like, you know, text speaking to someone who is blind or handicapped in a different way or anything like that. You don't know what you don't know, right? You've never been in that situation before. It's unreasonable for someone to expect you to know all the social cues or graces or anything like that.
Exactly.
And one of my previous interviewees was Hermine Lager, and I spoke to about her before.
Yeah.
She's struggling with food addiction, but she's one of the most courageous people I know, because she opens up everything, right? She holds nothing back. She doesn't try to pretend to be perfect, but every day she feels like it's a struggle. But she's doing it, right? And she's posting on Facebook, today I failed, or, you know, I succeeded, and she draws people to her because she shows that she's capable of being vulnerable. And that takes so much courage, because I don't even think I'm capable of that level of courage. You know, it's so, to open yourself up like that, it's just so amazing. And I so admire her for her courage and her ability to stand after everything, you know. And I think not enough people have that courage. But also, it's not just the courage of the person doing the thing, but also the courage of the person accepting that difference. And a lot of times you lose your friends or your parents or something like that because they don't have the courage to accept the difference in you. Because it's so different in what their religion or their culture or their background or their history tells them to accept. So I think it takes a lot of courage to be accepting of someone else.
It does. But it pays dividends.
It does, right?
It pays dividends when we do.
I can't
And the thing is,
imagine.
you know,
Yeah.
Sorry, I think it's so interesting when you say, you know, I don't think I'd have that sort of courage like she does. And I would say to you, when you get the environment right, and you feel so passionate. I mean, you know, everybody talks about purpose, and there's a reason for that, right? But when there's so much passion, the passion and the purpose, if you like, absolutely overrides how you feel, if that makes sense. You will step out and do that, and that sounds the same with the, you know, the lady that you just referred to. You know, in my case, I was flying to Namibia to basically tell my story of coming out of the closet, and I was speaking to a global audience. I knew that there were people from some cultures that where culturally, you know, there are differing opinions about, you know, homosexuality. And I thought, well, I'm going to do this anyway because it matters to me. And it's not my story that matters to me, it's humanity that matters to me. And that everybody deserves to feel included, embraced, loved, and valued for who they are. And so I was nervous and apprehensive about delivering that message, and more so for the response that I would get. And as you mentioned, the response was overwhelming, actually.
I don't think there was a dry tear. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house, really, because we all want that acceptance. Even it doesn't matter how old you are, or how much you've done, where you've been, you still want acceptance, right? So one of the reasons why I even joined Toastmasters was I wanted some place to belong to. Yes, the speaking and the training and the leadership all added value to my life, especially the people in the organization. But I joined initially just because I wanted a place to belong to that wasn't work related, right? I wanted to increase my value in other people, or I don't know how to say it, and I found value, and I found inclusion, and all these things, all these wonderful things that I thought, you know, I never thought about really, but I wanted it. I had that sort of intrinsic nature to try and find it. And I think, if we need to start with love and or value, or whatever you want to call it, you know, appreciation, love, value, all these things. And that's what really builds us as a humanity, as a species, and that's what builds us forward. And I really think, I really think that corporates, especially now, they've changed their minds in a lot of ways, and they are becoming more inclusive and more. I want to say woke, but I'm too white. But it's so wonderful to know that it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a black man or come from a disimpoverished family or whatever. You are still valuable, and if you can show that you add more value to other people, and you have the vulnerability to recognize that you don't know everything, and there are going to be times when you fail, people will respond to that, and people will give you the opportunity to grow, I think.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, there are steps being made. I mean, let's not make out that the world isn't changing. It is. On the other hand, I think that this is a long journey. It's made longer through a lack of understanding and a lack of courage for people to step out and say, okay, I don't know, but I want to know. I don't know how things are where you are, but certainly, you know, in the UK, there are still huge numbers of those suffering with mental or physical disabilities that just cannot find work. And it's not that they are not capable of themselves going out to find that work, or it's not that they're incapable of performing the role. It's often led through fear. The barriers are led by fear from the leaders of organizations who just don't know how to accommodate, don't know how to bring the best from that person, see them as a problem. I was watching a program on the TV the other night, and you know, there was a particular gentleman who suffered with severe anxiety and panic attack. And so this is not necessarily an easily visible disability, but a severe disability nevertheless. And he had been described, I mean, this went legal and he won, thankfully, but, you know, he had been described by his leaders as a whiner, as a whinge, as a moaner, as a troublesome employee, just because he'd explained that he needed small changes in his work environment to help him perform to the level he was capable to perform, and see help that company grow. And you know, and they treated him like he was just creating problems for no reason. And this is, I mean, it was horrendous to hear, but it therefore comes from a place where people do lack courage and vulnerability to step up and say, okay, I don't know, and I want to know. Because when we miss those things, we revert to labeling, and often those labels can be harmful, as was the case for this particular gentleman in that situation. And it is not an isolated incident. And it doesn't help the world, you know. And I think this is where, when there is a lack of understanding and a lack of openness and safety in our environments, workplace, social places, etc., and people don't want to understand, they choose to not take the steps that they could take, then this is where the labels, the name calling, and you know, the kind of, as I would say, ganging up on the minority come into play. It's not helpful. It's not even great vocabulary. It's just all we can think of, you know, to make ourselves feel better. Yeah. And you know, so it's a tough call. It's not going to be something, this inclusion is not a topic that will be solved overnight, but it is a topic that, when everybody takes ownership, can be solved quicker than it currently is being around the world. Definitely.
So it's not something that is solvable overnight, but it is something that has a solution to it. It's not, it's do you see, but you do see change, and you do see it doesn't happen for everyone. And I think really in that, because the leadership has that sort of mentality, right? It trickles down. And then because it becomes okay to do that us versus them sort of thing, because we focus on the differences, right? Instead of just implementing small steps to change, to make things easier, because you don't know how productive that person can be, because you don't even give them a chance. And it feels so limited in thinking when I hear something like that, because we just don't think. We need to think better, ask better questions, see what else, where else, how else, of what else. And I think that's a barrier for success. Every time we put that us versus them, or focus only on the differences rather than our diversity. So diversity develops, differences divide. So focus on our diverseness and our uniqueness rather than our differences.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier as well about you know, you can't change somebody's culture, and that's true, right? So we all have our own backgrounds or our own cultural backgrounds. In organisations, cultures can be changed, but they are led by what we see every day. You know, I talk about the fact that we learn language and behaviour from the behaviour and the language that we see and hear around us every day. And it starts when we're little kids, you know, with our parents or our caregivers and our teachers, and then our fellow pupils as our peer groups, and then so it continues. And in later life, of course, it then becomes your boss or your peer group in the workplace, the leadership team, the organizational values culture that is created. And so, you know, what I've seen and I've seen both sides, by the way. What I've seen is organizations that have values that they say, oh, we are, we're all about people, and people matter, and we're honest, and integrity, and all these kind of buzzwords. And actually, the language and the behaviors within the organization do not demonstrate that. So those values are just simply words on a poster, right? Or words on a website. They're buzzwords to make that organization feel good, look good, whatever. But they're not living and breathing those things within. And furthermore, there is nobody that is challenging that within the organization.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, I've also seen and worked with organizations that are just really getting a handle on it well. So, yes, they also have organizational values, but they're really looking underneath those words to say, well, what does that mean here in our language, in our behaviors, in our actions, the way we have meetings, the way we engage with people, hire people, all those kind of components come into play. And they're really getting it. And it's those people that will attract and recruit good people. And furthermore, it is those people that will develop and retain great, motivated, safe-feeling people who perform well.
Absolutely. And I do agree that we mentioned checklists before, right? So those core values were just like a business plan. We need some core values, like just a check mark, okay, we got the core values, we picked up, we just did core values on Google, and we took the first three. We need a business plan. Okay, here's a template. Okay, but you have to live it. You have to experience it, and it comes from leadership. It has to. So, like, this is my Toastmasters coin, right? On the back of it, it has the Toastmasters core values: integrity, respect, service, and excellence. I just added creativity too. So, like, I've adopted these, but added creativity, and everything I do, it has to confine to my core values, because if it doesn't, then I can't be authentic enough to do it. If it's not respectful, if it doesn't have the integrity, if it doesn't do service or justice or something like that, and if I can't do it to the best of my ability, then it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It doesn't have to be the most wonderful thing that you've ever seen. But it has to be uniquely you, and it has to be creative for me, meaning I have to put myself into it. And for core values and corporates, if it's just a check mark, how many people actually in that organization know their core values? I wonder,
I know.
They probably pass it day by day.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And, Paul Cabal, he calls them non-negotiables, and it's so true. These are my non-negotiables. And I think, we're slightly off topic, but it's all interlinked.
It all includes inclusion and diversity.
Yeah, and core values, these are what certainly a lot of younger people now look for, because if they're choosing an employer, looking for somewhere to work, they will not only just look, and I'm sure it's not just young people, but certainly a lot of young people are doing, is they're looking for work with meaning, work with purpose, and to work with an organization that demonstrates values that align with their own personal values. And so if they see those values have been advertised, they then go into that organization and notice that there is a lack of inclusion, a lack of honesty, their voices not being heard, and all those kind of things that are somehow contradicting these organizational values. This is a direct, has a direct impact on an individual, and they're not going to stick around, right? They're not going to perform well. They're not going to stick around. There'll be increased sickness in the workplace. I think I read an article recently that suggested only about something crazy, like about 2% of sickness in the workplace is down to actual sickness, and the rest of it is down to I don't want to be there. I don't feel happy there, or whatever. And inclusion plays a massive part in that, a massive part
Absolutely.
in employee well-being.
And I did an interview with Paul as well last year about core values and corporates and his value to profit model, about how people are taking sick leave and they're not sick, they just don't want to be there.
Exactly.
Or they even show up and they just cruise through the day, you know, which is actually even worse because, you know, you're actively damaging things by just being there but not being there. And that's because you don't feel valued. You don't feel like you're included. Right. You don't feel like someone is celebrating your uniqueness or your diversity or your unique you-ness. And, you know, when you said that you stepped on stage and you had to be you, right? And you had to share your journey and everything you do, it has to be from you. It has to be from your experience and your training and your knowledge and all these things. But if you would stand on stage and you were to speak on, I don't know, something else, technology and IT in the industry or something like that, right? It would immediately come across as false. It wouldn't be you, and you wouldn't be Jackie.
Right.
So if we force people to be diverse, it would also damage relationships and the values of an organization. So just because we want that check mark on our list of things to do, rather than celebrating our humanity, starting with love and value and respect. And I want to thank you so much for your journey and for sharing that journey, because it made me also look at the things that I've done. And have I been accepting of different ideas? Have I been accepting of different people and different ways of doing things? And sometimes I think maybe I failed. Maybe I didn't say the right words, but maybe there's enough time to try again.
Well, when I delivered my, thank you for those comments, by the way, and I'm really glad that the talk touched you in that way, because it's my intention. And when I delivered the TEDx talk, there was, so there were some similarities to the talk that you saw, but there were also some elements of where I questioned the audience, and of course your viewers can watch it or whatever, but I questioned the audience to say, you know, did you ever use words like that?
Yeah.
You know, so somewhere along the line in the inclusion humanity space, we have all either been the odd one out, the bully, or the one who saw it happen and didn't challenge
nothing,
it.
Yeah.
And I've been in probably at some point in my life in all three of those categories. I'm not proud of that, but I acknowledge that. And so now I have an opportunity through my voice and through world stages to start making the impact that I would love to see in the world. And it starts one step at a time.
I think that's a good place to end this conversation off. It has to start one step at a time. No one says you need to make leaps and bounds in progress, but you need to start somewhere. And you need to listen to your core values. And if those core values aren't who you are or who you want to be, then you need to change you or the core values. But something needs to change. And
be courageous enough to say, I want to know how to take that step. And find somebody like me to help.
Absolutely, yeah.
That,
Jackie's details will be listed in the section, the description of YouTube. And if you do have a question or a comment on diversity or inclusion, please leave it in the comment section. If you want to get someone like Jackie, or specifically Jackie, because I know what she's capable of, to come and do training for you and your staff and how to make incremental changes to be more inclusive and to celebrate our humanity and start with our value and our love, then please do contact her through our website. And all the links and to our social media stuff will be in the description. Jackie, thank you so much for joining this episode of MindMeld. I really, really appreciate it. And I think I've learned something, and I hope that everybody who watches this also has found some new perspectives to start making some incremental changes to be more inclusive and diverse in their thinking. Jackie, this has been a MindMeld interview. Thank you so much, and keep moving up.
Thank you. I will. You too.
See you next time. Oh, please subscribe.
Oh, yes.
How to put that in?
Hit the button. Click the button.
Hit the button. Yeah, hit that button. Subscribe, people. Come on. Subscribe, share, like, comment, all kinds of things. Okay. Thank you. See you next time.